which would be just Conservation Nebraska on Facebook. And we also have a YouTube channel where we recorded a lot of programs on just a wide variety of topics involving the environment. But we're really happy to be here in Wayne tonight and to have our two wonderful speakers who I'm going to go ahead and let introduce themselves and to talk about wind energy.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for setting us up there. I'm hopefully a little bit more familiar than my partner here, being the mayor of the town. But my name is Cale Giese, and I'm speaking to you tonight representing the group that I work for, which is the Center for Infrastructure and Economic Development. The center was founded about 2 years ago. A conglomeration or a group of development-minded people got together with Mike Johans and Terry Branstad to help navigate the discussion that was going to take place across rural America regarding renewable energy, and knowing that this was going to be a hot topic issue as it kind of spread across the country. So I think Ross and I are both going to focus more on the economics side and the benefits that we have seen from renewable energy across the state. I'm going to hit a little bit more on the political atmosphere and the climate that I see as I'm going out across the state and the trends that are happening. And Ross is going to hit a little bit more just on the straight finance side. So,
okay, go ahead.
Well, you go tell them about yourself so they know who's
okay.
there first.
I'm Ross Knott, live in Petersburg, Nebraska. Been there since 1998. Work in a community bank there in town, and been on the city council, or we're not big enough to have a city council. We have a village board. We have a population of 329 people. So been involved with the wind development, some sales tax things, different things in our community. And when you get wrapped up, I'll touch on some of the stuff that we see as a result of the impact of wind and renewables and things in our community and county.
Perfect. So politically speaking, this gets to be such a hot topic. One, I mean, any time that we change something in our daily life or in our atmosphere or in our communities, there's a lot of fear. So fear is probably the number one thing that I hear when I'm out going across the state. And it doesn't matter if I'm in Wayne, if I'm down in Falls City, or if I'm in, Banner County. It's all the same kind of objections that we have generally. And in these town halls, kind of the strategy is like what I like to call like the painting the wall method, where you just take every single fear that you have and you throw it against the wall. And maybe that resonates with some of the county officials who are in the room. And hopefully one of those things that you said resonates with them, and then you can get enough support to stop this. Where it gets really interesting, and where it's so important to be able to have tough political conversations now, because we don't do it as frequently as we used to. Maybe that's because politics are more ingrained into our daily lives. Maybe politics are just more polarized generally. And the tough decision is, you own property that is definitely going to impact yourself. What choices can you make on your property, and what right does your neighbor have to say that you don't have the right to do that? Can you put up a hog confinement if you're close to your neighbors, and those three neighbors get together and say, we don't want to smell this? We watched this happen from afar, kind of before the wind energy came in, and it was with the Costco chicken barns. We watched this, Costco go home, Costco stay away. I think after a bunch of terrible city, or county meetings, city meetings, everything, these barns went in, most of the fears were largely eliminated. But it's that fear of the unknown that really impacts. So my organization's goal is really to try to find the balance of the policy. How do we protect landowner rights, but also respect the neighbors and the communities that these projects are going into? Because we all use electricity every day. I mean, besides for, air and water and sewer, it's, without electricity, our civilization grinds to a stop. And if you want to go and complain to me that, we shouldn't use renewable energy, because of some federal policies that were put in place. Great. Take those concerns directly to Washington, D.C., talk to the federal people and say, you've set the board up in an unfair manner for everybody else to play. But what we have to do here is ensure reliability for our electrical production. I mean, right now, assuming that those wind turbines are turning, the photons in this room are powered by the turbines that are nearby. When they're not, we get our power all the way from Sutherland, Nebraska, from a coal plant. And I don't know if you saw, but just in the last week, the EPA has ordered that scrubbers be put on Gerald Gentleman. Now they'll appeal that, but that's going to raise the price of coal. And eventually we're not going to be lucky enough to live in a state where we have Gerald Gentleman, which is the cheapest coal producing plant, I think, in the United States. I think it is still right now. That's going to go away at some point. And what are we going to do? Very complex decisions. And nobody wants a windmill in their backyard. Nobody wants a high voltage transmission line in their backyard. Nobody wants a coal plant. Nobody wants a nuclear power plant in their backyard. Somebody eventually has to say yes, or we're not going to be able to enjoy the same quality of life that we have today. So balanced policy, where are we going to find that at? We need to have good conversations at the local level, and that's kind of what our organization's goal is. That was a rant.
That's it?
That's all I got for right now. Fill my tank back up.
Well, I can tell you right now, he's a lot better speaker than I am.
He stands up though. He gets points for that.
Well, it's just habit. So, like I mentioned earlier, I'm from Petersburg, Nebraska. We're in northern Boone County. We got kind of active in wind development a number of years ago. Was involved with some trips to Omaha to talk to Omaha Public Power. Made a few appearances at Nebraska Public Power's board meetings in Columbus. And we were a struggling little community located, like I say, in northern Boone County, 329 people. And the size of the farming operations continued to get bigger and bigger, required fewer and fewer people as the equipment grew, efficiencies grew, all of those types of things. And we were worried about maintaining our community. And so we tried to explore different ways to do that. And we had a number of wind production people that were knocking on our doors wanting to do surveys because we were in a good wind area according to the national maps. So we saw it as an opportunity to maybe build some population, create some good jobs. And I'm not standing up here and telling you that wind energy or solar energy is the answer to all of our country's energy needs, but I do think it has a place, and it will continue to have a place, and that place will get stronger as more of it's developed and we can figure out how to not only generate it, but save it, store it, and use it when it's needed, which will in turn cut down on the fossil fuel needs and requirements and the nuclear and all of those types of things. So that gives you a little background of where we were at and where we started. Right now, according to the county commissioner in the clerk's office in Boone County, we have 113 towers located in northern Boone County. They're on a 20-year purchase power agreement. They bring in about $627,000 in taxes per year, the number of towers we have, based off the nameplate capacity tax. So over a 20-year period, that's going to bring $12,538,000 into our county. And it didn't take land out of production really to do that. I know there was some concern early on that if I have a wind tower, what's going to happen to the valuation of my property? Is anybody going to want it? We just haven't seen that affect land values. If anything, they've probably gotten a little bit stronger. With those 113 towers, we also have about an $8,000 per tower annual rent fee that's going to the landowner. So that's about $904,000 a year. I believe in a whole economy, it used to be $1 would turn over 7 times. We in Petersburg are obviously not a whole economy. But when you figure gas stations, schools, implement dealers around the area, whatnot, I would say we probably turn at least 4 times for every new dollar generated, even in our little community and area, we would turn that over about 4 times. So on an annual basis, if you take the 113 towers times $8,000 times a $4 turn, that's a $3.6 million cash turnover in our community that we didn't have, obviously, before wind towers came to town. Also on the 113 towers, I believe they figure it's about 8 towers per employee. So those jobs usually run about $80,000 a year with overtime, wages, some benefits and whatnot. So 113 towers, 8 towers per employee. We've got 14 new employees in town. They're good jobs. They're not great jobs, but they're a different kind of job than what we've had access to in the past too. They're not working for a hog confinement, working for a feedlot, or, working for a large farm. So take those 14 employees times $80,000 a year. That's about $1.1 million a year in wages coming into our community. Turn that over 4 times. That's a $4.4 million. So you add the two together, we see about an $8 million in dollar generation turnover. And we have seen now, well, I'll back up a little bit. Before the wind towers, our main street was like everybody else's main street. Maybe not yours, you got a college in town and whatnot, but a smaller rural community. We were having plenty of weeds grow up in the sidewalk cracks, and the buildings on Main Street were vacant. They had some broken glass or doors off, and it was, our school had just merged with Albion, and so we lost a full K through 12. We did have a small parochial school that was a part of the school in Elgin, Pope John, and we ended up losing that too. And like backing up there, everybody's saying, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Well, you can't do anything without people. You have to have people. And if we lose our schools, we lose our Main Street businesses, our farms consolidate, where were we going to find people? So when we did this, since then, it's been a bit of a transformation of our community. We have a pretty strong local economic development group. We've done a couple housing additions. At one time, I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago, we actually had 6 new homes being built in our community, all in the same summer. And that's not a lot probably for Wayne, but
proportionally
for a town of 300, it was huge. The grocery store was selling hot meals every day to people that were working on these new homes, and the gas station was pumping more gas, and the bar was serving more beer, and our little economy was really kind of chugging along. We've continued to be able to put up anywhere from 1 to 3 new homes a year over the course of the last 6-8 years. We have a new repair shop in town, a young kid that had moved away, went to school in Lincoln, wanted to come back. Our local economic development group helped him put up a building and put it on a 5-year triple net lease with the option to buy it out at the end of the 5 years. He exercised the option. Now he's looking to add an employee because he's super busy. We had an electrician that was retiring. We needed an electrician. We put up a building, got a kid to come to town that was working for another electrician. He's got 3 employees and looking to try to expand his business. These little spin-offs are, that I don't know how you could say they are tied to the renewable energy and the wind development, but I also don't know how you can say they're not. Because we didn't have those things going on. We didn't have the vibrant community. Now it's not uncommon on a summer's evening to see 4 or 5 young women with pushing baby strollers or having little kids riding them electric Jeeps or cars or something around, walking around town. And I think the renewable energy has played a big key in that for our community. I don't know really what else when you want to have questions, I don't know how you exactly want this, or do you got some opportunity? You got more stuff you want to say?
Yeah, I'll talk all the time.
Well,
you mentioned, the farmers who sign these leases, were they, I mean, you're seeing their financial documents, but like, is that allowing them to bring their kid back earlier than they normally would have, or an heir, or set themselves up for better success? What type of, on the business side of it, what have you been seeing?
There's probably a lot of different venues where it's had an immediate impact. Like I referred to, we had an old grocery store on Main Street. It was typical, a house that turned into a grocery store, and then the living room of another house that was okay yet got moved on and attached to the side, and you had uneven steps and whatnot. Well, the individual that bought the grocery store also had 4 towers on his property. That rental income afforded him the opportunity to build a new grocery store that is all ADA accessible. It's bright. It's all on one level. He added a room for a hairdresser, a meeting room for community meetings. And without the rent from those towers, would have obviously not been able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
We've had some smaller operators that were able to maintain their operation and their diversity with a tower or 2, because it kind of takes care of the grocery bill and some of the living costs that they weren't able to generate. Some of the larger farmers, it's amazing if you have $32,000 or $40,000 a year coming in off of something other than production ag, it does allow another child to come home. And maybe the spouse works at the hospital or the school or whatever, but it's really slowed down the amount of real estate available for sale in our area. Because people are able to kind of make a better living and keep it in the ownership generational.
What year did these towers go in?
I was worried somebody was gonna ask me that. I believe around 2012. I think we're about halfway through the original agreements on some of the first farm towers. We have 4 different farms right in around the area. And we handled it a little bit different when the construction crews came to town. You know, you was seeing a number of people. We tried to find all the campsites, all the housing, all the everything we could, because we took the approach of, we want them in town. We want them to know who we are, and we want them to do business with us locally. So like during the construction phase, when we find out how many peak employees they had out there, we would go out at 4:30 in the morning and cook pancakes and eggs and tell the employees, come to town, buy your groceries, buy your gas, buy your beer. We want you here. We've got these services. And it really helped our little local businesses during that construction phase. And it established a pretty good reputation because we've actually had a couple of the guys that were on the original farm that was built have moved back now and spend a lot of time in town and own a property or two in town. So that kind of digressed from your question.
No,
it
but
ties it all back.
I think it's actually more visible to see both the temporary benefits and the long-term benefits in a smaller community. Because like you said, it's the different, like, it's hard to say in a city the size of Wayne, if you add, 20 citizens in, sure, it's gonna make some type of impact, but not nearly the impact that it's gonna make in a town of 300.
Right.
And to be able to see the long-term benefits too of, there's actually young families in town. I mean, that's such a huge.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts. You can't identify any one single thing, but definitely the numbers, the dollars, the timing, it's been huge for us. And like I say, I fully believe that it's a piece of the future for our country and for our globe. It's going to take some development yet. I have this huge fantasy of using hydroelectric as the storage mechanism for wind energy, but you'd probably never see that pulled off with the restrictions we have now. And I don't know if you all are familiar with that, but there are parts in the world that have a reservoir, a high reservoir and a low reservoir. So they use the wind energy to pump water up to the high reservoir when they have it. And then when they need the electricity, they run it back down through their hydro plants. And that is the storage mechanism. And I can just envision the boat docks and the lake homes and the tax rolls. But having the right setup geographically to do that close to a wind farm we just don't have it. But God, I wish we did, because it could make a huge impact.
You hit on three things that I kind of wanted to expand on a little bit. One was the downplaying of temporary benefits. This is something that I see a lot in these meetings. Well, the jobs are like temporary, but like being a small business owner, I can tell you, like, if you have a deadline that you need to replace a fire door, or you've got a bad piece of equipment, or you need a new roof, like sometimes a temporary bump is all you need just to keep going, to maintain your own level of lifestyle. A $10,000 bump in business or a $40,000 bump in business can change your ability to maintain your current level. The second one was this has a place. It's not the answer. I think that's key to the discussion. Is we want to deal in absolutes sometimes, where it's like, oh, well, you want renewable energy, like you want everything to be 100% these wind towers, like, well, that's not exactly what the conversation currently is. When we saw this during Winter Storm Uri, where cold front that's unprecedented comes in, moves across the United States, freezes gas in the line, coal's too cold to scrape off the ground. The nuclear power won't run because the pipes are frozen. What do? The wind wasn't blowing during Uri. Solar was the only thing working. And we just don't have very much of it. And that's why we were in the condition that we are. So resiliency and dependability have a lot to do with variation and having a nice mix. And I had a third one, but I didn't write that down.
Well, do I need to make up some more stuff or what?
Absolutely. No, I'm guessing we're probably pretty good into, we're halfway. So do you want to do? Yeah, sure. You ask me one question, I'll rant for another 20 minutes and then, yeah.
Ross is around halfway through, so I think the overall was a 20-year deal. And so are you ready to move forward to what's planning ahead, like the next round? I don't know what comes next.
Well, in that I don't honestly know. you know, we did at the county commissioner level, we did put some things in place for the decommissioning of the farm so that if something were to go or it gets replaced by something we don't even know what it is at this time, we're not going to be stuck with a bunch of wind towers out in our rural area. The initial ones that were done, they were done on a 2 to 2.25% annual inflationary adjustment for the cost of the electricity per the PPA, as well as just the overall operation of the farm. Well, everybody's pretty familiar with some of the conversations that were being had here earlier. You know, 2.25% inflation built into the contract is not keeping pace with what's going on today. So I don't know what to really expect or to anticipate when negotiations start on these new contracts. And I don't know how they'll work. I served on the Loop Power Board for a while. And I believe I served a 6-year term. I've been off for 2 years, and 12 years prior to that, me being on that board, they were working on renewing their hydroelectric license for their 2 little facilities Loop Public Power runs. And to my knowledge, those are still not renewed. Those licenses they're operating, but there's no license in place. So what's going to happen with how much more bogged down government gets, how long things take? I'd be lying if I tried to predict what might happen when them come up for renegotiation.
That's one of the things that as a county, at the government level, at the county, to get the decommissioning schedule right before the projects go in. And that's something that we preach is reevaluation of the decommissioning every 5 years to take place so that we don't have to go to well, who knows what's going to happen here? You know, what are they just going to say this is how much? I did meet with a guy who did decommissioning, and it was less than I had expected the cost to be, which I think is good news for everybody, but who knows how those costs change. I mean, you get in and you learn that what you're doing isn't making enough money, or that you can charge more, and all of a sudden, you know, how much are you going to charge to have something off your property?
Right. And that's we're just not going to know that till we see more of it.
Yeah.
And the nice thing is, I guess, there's finally enough farms around and enough opportunities around that it's easier to go see and talk to people and get a better idea of what is going to happen or how things might unfold. You know, Bloomfield had a farm. I think we were next. Bloomfield's farm was still on the 7-year personal property tax schedule, and that was a real nightmare, I think, for their government and their school district to manage. Thankfully, you know, the nameplate capacity tax has made that part better.
Yeah.
Everyone that goes in, it seems like not only are the towers a little better, the reliability a little better, the negotiations, the contracts, there's more things that are known and able to be discussed and reconciled early instead of late.
Yeah. The question, I think back first.
What is the average expectancy for these homes, and what happens when you're doing work? Where do you go?
Yeah.
Do you know exactly? Because
I don't know exactly. Most all of them are bid on a 20-year contract as far as what they generate. I do not see, but I don't believe I've seen a nacelle replaced in our area. We have had one group of blades that the manufacturing must have not been quite to specs, or the circumstances weren't quite right. You know, I'm sure it's going to be like everything else. once there is enough of them decommissioned or tore down or wore out, there will be those renewable uses of them will come to light or be more prevalent when there's more of them that need to be dealt with. But right now I can't tell you. The tower itself, I would think that thing could stand up about indefinitely. It'd just be replacing the nacelle and the blades.
So depending on the year manufacturing, what I've seen from the manufacturers, like little manual, they say anywhere from 20 to 30 years, depending on that. And then you can repower it again for about as long. So yeah, very long lifespans. But to get rid of them, it all comes down to money. Now there's somebody who opened up a shop. It's either in, I think it's in Iowa, could be Missouri. But what they've found out is that they can grind the whole structure into cement, and it strengthens the cement. But what is most common is a landfill's close. You take the blade, you cut it in half, you stick the blade inside of itself. You do that 3 times or something to reduce the amount of size that it's going to take up in the dump, and you take it to the dump. So somebody will find a use for that much mass, I think. Anything that you need to add fiberglass weight to, anything you need to add that weight to, I think you grind it up, stick it in there. Cement's probably an easy one. Makes the most sense.
Can you calculate the annual electrical value of the production of a wind turbine against the cost of operation, maintenance, repairs, depreciation, rent and farm, insurance, taxes, and all that kind of stuff, as compared to the value of the government subsidy, tax credits, grants, investment tax credits, things like that?
Absolutely, if I had all those numbers, but I don't have them.
Getting economic development from the value of electricity, or you get economic development from the inputs in the form of subsidies, tax credits, grants from the government? Is that being transferred into development rather than electricity?
Well, I'm sure it's all part of the total picture. Yeah. I guess we wouldn't have the towers in our location if we didn't have the wind consistency and speeds that are conducive to putting them there. We wouldn't have the jobs that we've got in some cases without the towers being there. The landowners wouldn't have the rent income from the tower without the tower. As far as just what's it cost to generate a usable, electricity, I don't see that as being cheaper. For sure it isn't cheaper than coal or nuclear.
For sure it's cheaper.
No, for sure it isn't cheaper than coal or nuclear.
According to, there's 3 organizations that I could point to on this. Bloomberg's got good. What we're looking at is a term called levelized cost of electricity, LCOE. And what we can look at there is you strip away all the subsidies and what's the cost of electricity. And actually wind and solar are cheaper than any other form. As of Lazar's, Bloomberg, and I actually got the sources printed out here. It's one of the US Department of Energy's information agency. So according to those 3, the levelized cost of electricity, you drop them all out, you drop out all the subsidies, wind and solar at the very bottom.
And as you must consider that all the subsidies become part of the cost of electricity. You got the cost of electricity, the production cost, but you got all the subsidies.
I got to stop you because the levelized cost of electricity is there's no subsidies.
Yeah, but you got to understand.
They don't get bills out. Because they don't cash flow.
But this is saying that they do, but they do exist and they are part of, you know, our policy. So, I mean, if you want to play, if you want to take it as it is, I'm telling you, the levelized cost of electricity, you take away the subsidies and wind and solar are still the cheapest. That's what I'm telling you. If you want to put the subsidies back in, which is how we have to play the game. We have to play the game with the way that the rules are set up. So playing pretend, I'm telling you that it's still that way, or it is that way. And when we don't play pretend, it's still that way. So
Just give you an example. One, consider a tax credit, a production tax credit in particular. Do you consider that a?
yes, by definition. Well, you'd have to look at the methodology, but what other subsidy would be included in that? What other subsidy are these developers getting that besides the tax credit? Because that's the primary one, isn't it?
Smaller turbines, I've got an advertisement of those.
But smaller turbines are for personal use. I mean, why would we're talking about utility, community. If you want to make your own personal decision about wind or solar on your own house, I mean, once again, you're going to be looking at the rules of the game of which we're all playing. It's not going to be like, you know, if you're going to go buy a stove for your house, you're not going to say, well, before I purchase the stove, I need to see if there's subsidies coming down for this stove company, you know, from something. You know, it's personal choice.
Tax, I kind of like tax money is being invested in a kind of businessman. I kind of like to see a good return. I want to tell you that the smaller turbines have a 50% REAP grant from the USDA available and a 50% investment tax credit, and Part 179 is available for depreciation. And if you're in a 50% tax bracket, that would be worth another 50%.
I get what you're saying, but I don't think it's pertinent to the discussion. Brother, this is not the time or place. I mean, if you want to talk about federal subsidies, you should talk to somebody who specializes in that. You've got a banker from Petersburg here and a guy who's trying to help local governments navigate the setbacks to decommissioning and the other local government control mechanisms. So if you want to talk about subsidies, I think, you know, Adrian Smith or one of your other congressmen would be a great place to start.
And to add on to your point earlier, yes, from a fuel cost, wind and solar are by far the cheapest and the best. I believe that's the first stuff bid into the Southwest Power Pool when NPPD and OPPD and LES went into the Southwest Power Pool, where we bid in all of our generation and then we buy back electricity every day, or NPPD does, or whoever your provider is. So, you know, you can break it down about however you want to and formulate any kind of an argument for what end game you want to be arrived at. But for Petersburg, our little community, the jobs it's created, the dollars we're generating, and it's going to happen somewhere at some time. This isn't the only stupid decision our federal government's ever made, and it's not going to be the last one either. You're either going to take advantage of it, or you're going to sit on the sidelines and somebody else is going to take advantage of it.
I said earlier that we all depend on the electricity. The cost, your levelized cost, that heat and chart is listed there, the cheap end of it at $24 a megawatt. Today, the production tax credit is $28 per megawatt. That means that wind could afford to give their power away and still make $28 a megawatt. That will break General. And then coal plants go broke. we will be depending on undependable energy. We can't allow our coal plants to go broke. But if we do not buy power from them just because the wind is blowing, they're going to either have to raise their price for electricity that they charge us, or they will go broke. So that's my view. I'm a large.
Yeah, once again, I don't think you understand the process for putting these projects in. Not everybody can just go put in these projects with nowhere to sell the power to. You have to get approved that you have enough stable energy, not variable rate energy, to be put in. And it's not like you're just going to break Gerald Gentleman. Like you have a fundamental misunderstanding of how the power market works if that's what you believe or what you're worried about. Because that's not how pricing works, and that's not how anything works in the electricity sales market, because reliability and price have to go hand in hand. So if you think only comes down to price of variable, no, these power companies have a production portfolio that they sell, and they want more renewable because it's the cheapest option. So they want to juice that as much as they can, but they know that they have to be able to provide for the dependable energy.
We do have a couple of questions online.
Oh, great. Yep.
For that, since we want to continue to put on educational programs like this, filling out this survey would really help us continue to get grant money, so we can go around the state and talk to folks about different sources of energy, pollinators, different stuff. So I'm going to pass these about. That takes 2 seconds. And then,
What's that?
Question about process. In other words, let's just say there's no way that is the county wanting it, we want to have it, you go out and get it, or is the state or federal coming to you and saying, we want to put it whenever we here? How does it get started? And who does the initiative?
In our area, there was some wind energy developers that had researched the wind consistency and variability in our geographic area. And they found it to be a great location. So then they come out and they put up temporary monitoring things, and over a period of time, collect all the data at different levels from the surface up, I believe is the way they did it, to determine how often they could plan on that turbine spinning, so they could back into the numbers to determine the feasibility of it.
So who's encouraging them to study the company? Where is it originating? Is somebody saying, wow, Nebraska's got a lot of wind potential for energy?
It's coming from the private sector, to my knowledge.
Yep.
So private sector, you got a product, you want to sell it, you got the wind, it's going to have this trickle-down effect for everything else.
Yeah, and then when they do all the data for, like say the consistency and how much can that turbine generate, the capacity, and then they figure in all the incentives and everything else to determine the feasibility.
So if you do this, there's some benefits. You can subsidize this, things that go on to help get that product going. And my other piece of that is, what is Wayne County, what's their outlook for wind energy here?
I know that like in the immediate future, we're going to have a battery project going in. NextEra is putting in one. And this has to do with, it gets a little bit more complex power purchasing when you talk about like peak rating. And it's all about how you can decrease your peak load, right? So these batteries have their value because they capture and then they release during the peak to offset the peak. And that's where the value is captured at. As far as like Northeast Nebraska as a whole and in renewable energy, 5 years ago, I think my answer would have been a lot different. 5 years ago, Nebraska as a whole state, I think, was in a lot different position as far as how much electricity and production that we thought we had. Uri changed that a lot as far as we needed to increase the amount of production and the variety of production that we have. But the biggest thing has actually been AI computing and the amount of energy that that uses. We're looking at putting a substation in for Wayne right now. On a hottest day of the year, our town peaks at 18.6 megawatts usage. That's as much as we can do. We had a Bitcoin mining operation come to us and said, hey, you're about to put in a new substation. We want to use any excess capacity that you have. And we said, well, how much do you use? 15 megawatts all day, every day. Never turns off. So they use more than the whole city of Wayne uses on an average day, every day of the year, 24 hours a day. So that's what's changed in the last 5 years. And if you drive over by Papillion, you can see those campuses of Meta and Google, those data server farms. I mean, they're not mining Bitcoin, but it's the same type of energy usage where everything's on the cloud now, stored on the cloud, and those servers require a lot of juice. So we're going to have to increase the amount of power that we have, because I think in the next 5 to 10 years, we're set as a state to be a net power importer if we don't increase the amount of energy that we produce in the state. And we don't want to obviously be that. I mean, everybody wants to be power sufficient, power dependent. So not keeping up with supply, I think, is actually the greatest challenge to our society.
You have a question on. They're asking, does the carbon footprint of manufacturing turbines and transporting and activating them and other like over disposal outweigh the benefit of what they have? So.
I've got an answer, but
I don't have an answer.
and this is just from sitting in on all these town hall meetings that I've heard. It's 7 years is the break-even point for a turbine's operation to offset. And I have no idea. That is what I heard said. You have to look that up independently. Was there another one online?
That is the only one right now.
How many owners of those 114 wind turbines?
Or landowners?
Yes. How many people actually benefited from the towers out of 114? Because I guarantee there wasn't 114 people.
No, there wasn't 114 individual landowners, right? I would have, and I don't know the exact answer, but I would say probably there'd be about 2.5 towers per landowner. I know that doesn't sound very smart because you can't have a half a tower on 2 properties, but I think most of them are in that. Some people only have 1, some people have 4, but the majority are going to be in the 2 to 3.
So really it was 70, I'm going to just say just 2.
Well,
Yeah.
probably closer to 40, 45.
40 families benefited from
Right.
114.
Yep. That would be, I would say that's really close. Because I mean, when you start driving around and look at the acres each farm is anymore, and it takes a lot of land mass.
That's the benefit to a few.
Yeah.
$20,000 per family then? Is that what the?
Well, yeah, it's somewhere in that 8 some of the early ones are over 10. Some of the later ones are in the 6,500 to 7 range. So I just used 8 as kind of the average annual rent per tower.
Interesting.
Because we have several of them over here, we have 289 wind towers currently, at least 2 or 3 of them.
12.
What's that number? How many do we have total?
289. Out of the three that went up over here.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of them that are owned by quite a few people. I know two individuals that own one. Yeah, was it a big benefit to those? Yeah. Yeah, when you get offered 12 of them.
Yeah,
I don't want a landowner that didn't get offered one, but wanted to go through my group.
yeah,
That didn't go through my group. Because I gotta put up with everything that goes along with wind towers. that is not beneficial to giving them an easement through my property for a few dollars they were willing to give.
Right.
So it's really tough to
That is-
decide who the few are gonna get them and not. There's a lot of promises made to landowners, how they're gonna treat the land and how much erosion there is. There's a lot more erosion over in that portion of the county right now that they've never had before, because of how the roads were built into them and how much land they actually take up. So I would guarantee that they probably told everybody they're going to take up about 2 acres of the ground, and it's probably closer to 6 for every time. So there's 60 plus acres in your area that are probably not being used, which I don't think anybody on the wind side takes into consideration.
Right.
Well, if there are no other questions, I want to thank our speakers for taking time to discuss this issue with everybody. I know it's a sensitive topic, but thank you all for being here with your questions and concerns. Thanks for speaking.
Yeah, thanks for showing up.
Yeah.
Thanks for driving in.
You bet. Nice to meet you.